The morning sun cast long shadows across the mining colony on planet Kepler 442c. Taman Park walked slowly through the dusty paths between the metal buildings. His worn boots crunched on the red sand that covered everything on this world. He carried his scanner in one hand and a datapad in the other. Today was like any other day for the xenobiologist. He would check the local wildlife and make his reports. Tamin had been working on this remote planet for 3 years now. The mining company needed someone to study the local animals and plants. They wanted to make sure their operations would not cause problems with dangerous creatures. It was quiet work that suited him well. He preferred animals to people most days. The waste disposal area sat at the edge of the colony. Most workers avoided this place because of the smell. Taman often came here because small creatures like to search for food scraps. He had discovered several new species this way. As he approached the large metal containers, his scanner began making soft, beeping sounds. Something was different. Today, the scanner showed a life-form signature unlike anything in his database. Taman moved closer to the containers. The beeping grew louder. Behind the largest container, he heard a weak scratching sound. He walked around the metal wall and stopped. A small creature huddled against the container wall. It was no bigger than a house cat, but looked nothing like any earth animal. The creature had scales that seemed to be made of crystal. These scales flickered with dim blue and green lights. The lights pulsed slowly like a weak heartbeat. The creature's head was elongated with large eyes that watched Tamin with intelligence. Tamin knelt down slowly. He did not want to frighten the animal. The creature did not run away. Instead, it made a soft clicking sound. The lights in its scales grew slightly brighter. Tamin held up his scanner and ran a quick analysis. The results made him gasp. According to his database, this was a juvenile Velthari. The Velthari were known throughout the galaxy as massive predators. Adult Velthari could grow to the size of Earth's ancient dinosaurs. They were feared by most species, but this tiny creature looked nothing like the terrifying beasts described in the files. The little Velthari was clearly starving. Its crystal scales had lost most of their glow. Taman could see that the creature was weak and scared. It tried to stand but stumbled. One of its small wings dragged on the ground. The wing looked injured. Taman reached into his pack and pulled out his lunch. He had brought dried meat and some fruit from the colony's greenhouse. He broke off a small piece of meat and held it out. The young Velthari sniffed the air. Its scales flickered with hope. Carefully, it reached out with a small claw and took the meat. The creature ate the meat quickly. Then it looked up at Tai Min with what seemed like gratitude. The lights in its scales grew brighter. Tai Min offered more food. The Velthari ate everything he gave it. When the food was gone, the creature curled up in a small ball and fell asleep. Its scales now pulsed with steady, gentle light. Taman sat back on his heels and thought about what to do. Colony regulations were very clear about contact with potentially dangerous alien species. He should report this immediately. The creature would be captured and studied. Most likely, it would be killed if the authorities decided it was too dangerous. But looking at the sleeping creature, Taman could not imagine it hurting anyone. It was just a baby that needed help. He made a decision that would change his life, forever. He would take care of the creature in secret. He carefully picked up the young Velthari. It was lighter than he expected. The creature stirred but did not wake. Taman carried it back to his small quarters on the edge of the colony. His rooms were isolated from the main buildings. Few people ever visited him there. Taman made a nest for the creature using old blankets. He placed it in a corner of his laboratory where it would be safe. The young Velthari woke up as the sun was setting. It looked around the room with curious eyes. When it saw Tamin, its scales glowed with soft blue light. Over the next few days, Tamin learned more about his unusual guest. The creature was incredibly intelligent. It learned to recognize its name when Taemin called it Byol, which meant star in Korean. The name seemed fitting because of the way its scales sparkled. Byol understood simple gestures and commands. When Taemin pointed to food, Byol would come running. When Taemin held up his hand to signal stop, Byol would freeze in place. The creature even seemed to understand some human emotions. When Taemin was tired after long days of work, Byol would curl up quietly nearby. The young Velthari grew stronger each day. Its injured wing healed completely. Its scales grew brighter and more beautiful. Byol began making different sounds to communicate. A soft purring meant contentment. Quick clicks meant excitement. A low hum meant it wanted attention. But keeping. Byol's secret was becoming harder. The creature was growing larger each week. Its appetite was increasing too. Taemin had to be very careful when getting food. He could not let anyone discover what he was doing. One evening, Taemin was feeding Byol when his door chimed. Someone was outside. Quickly, he guided Byol into a storage closet and closed the door. He opened the main door to find Administrator Haewon Kim standing there with 2 security guards. Administrator Kim was a stern woman who ran the colony with strict rules. She looked past Taemin into his rooms. Her eyes were sharp and suspicious. "We have had reports of strange sounds coming from your quarters," she said. "Some workers claim to have seen unusual lights at night." Taemin tried to stay calm. "I work, late sometimes. Perhaps they saw my laboratory equipment." Administrator Kim stepped into the room. She looked around carefully. "You have been requesting additional food rations. More than one person needs." "I have been studying the local ecosystem," Taemin replied. "I need samples for my research." The administrator was not convinced. She moved toward the storage closet. Taemin's heart pounded. If she found Byol, everything would be over. Then, a loud alarm sounded throughout the colony. One of the mining machines had malfunctioned. Administrator Kim and her guards had to leave immediately to handle the emergency. As soon as they were gone, Taemin opened the closet door. Byol looked up at him with worried eyes. The creature had heard everything. Its scales pulsed with nervous energy. Taemin knelt down and gently stroked Byol's head. "Do not worry, little star," he whispered. "I will protect you." But Taemin knew their time was running short. Soon he would have to make another difficult decision. The colony was becoming too dangerous for Byol. The young Velthari needed space to grow and learn. Most importantly, it needed to be free. As Byol fell asleep that night, its scales glowing softly in the darkness, Taemin began planning their escape from the mining colony. He did not know that this small act of kindness toward a hungry creature would eventually reshape the entire galaxy. The adventure was just beginning. 6 months had passed since Taemin first found Byol behind the waste containers. The young Velthari had grown from the size of a house cat to that of a large dog. His crystal scales now shimmered with brilliant colors that changed with his moods. Happy moments brought warm, golden glows. Curiosity made his scales flicker with silver sparks. When he was content, soft blue waves rippled across his body. Taemin had moved his laboratory equipment to create more space for his growing companion. Byol no longer fit in the storage closet. Instead, Taemin had built a hidden chamber beneath his quarters. The chamber connected to natural caves that ran under the colony. This gave Byol room to stretch his wings and explore safely. The dragon had become incredibly intelligent. He understood dozens of human words now. When Taemin said food, Byol would run to his feeding area. When Taemin said hide, Byol would quickly disappear into the underground chambers. Most amazingly, Byol had learned to recognize different people by their footsteps and voices. Dr. So-Young Lee had become Taemin's closest ally at the colony. She was the only other xenobiologist on the planet. So-Young was a kind woman with sharp eyes, and a curious mind. She had noticed Taemin's strange behavior months ago. Instead of reporting him, she had quietly investigated. One evening, So-young knocked on Taemin's door with a knowing smile. "I brought some fresh fruit from the greenhouse," she said. "I heard you have been feeding a very special guest." Taemin's face went pale. He tried to deny everything, but So-young held up her hand. "I have been tracking your food requests and energy usage. Your quarters use twice the power they should. Plus, I found some very interesting scale samples near the mining area." Seeing that his secret was discovered, Taemin reluctantly let So-young into his quarters. He called softly to Beol. The young Velthari emerged from the hidden chamber with cautious steps. His scales pulsed with nervous purple light. So-young gasped when she saw Beol. "He is beautiful," she whispered, "and much larger than I expected." Beol studied the new human carefully. After a few moments, his scales shifted to curious silver. He approached So-young slowly and sniffed her hand. Then he made a soft, purring sound that meant acceptance. "He likes you," Taemin said with relief. "Beol is very good at reading people." From that day forward, So-young helped care for Beol. She brought medical supplies when the dragon had minor injuries. She also brought news from the colony that helped them stay hidden. Most importantly, she provided friendship for both Taemin and Beol during the lonely months. Beol's abilities continued to develop in amazing ways. He could sense approaching weather changes hours before the colony's instruments detected them. His scales would flash with specific patterns that warned of storms or dangerous wind conditions. The mining crews began to notice that equipment. Failures happened less often when Taemin was nearby to read Beol's warnings. The young dragon also showed an unusual talent for sensing underground structures. He could detect ore deposits, water sources, and unstable ground by placing his claws on the earth. His scales would change colors to indicate what lay beneath. Gold meant valuable minerals. Blue meant water. Red meant danger. Commander Woo Jin Choi was the head of colony security. He was a suspicious man who trusted few people. The commander had been watching Taemin for months. He knew something unusual was happening but could not prove it. Woo Jin began increasing patrols around Taemin's quarters. The situation became more dangerous when Beol demonstrated his protective instincts. A mining accident trapped 3 workers in a collapsed tunnel. The regular rescue teams could not locate the trapped men. The tunnels were too unstable for heavy equipment. Taemin knew that Beol could help, but using the dragon's abilities would expose their secret. He struggled with the decision while precious time passed. Finally, his conscience won. He could not let people die when he could help them. That night, Taemin and Beol sneaked to the collapse site. Beol placed his claws on the ground and closed his eyes. His scales flickered through many colors as he sensed the underground structure. After several minutes, he opened his eyes and pointed to a specific location with his snout. "They are there," Taemin whispered into his communicator. He had disguised his voice and was using an emergency frequency. "Dig at coordinates 127 by 89, 15 meters down. Be careful of weak ground to the east." The rescue teams followed the mysterious instructions. They found all 3 workers alive within 2 hours. The colony celebrated the successful rescue, but Commander Woo Jin became more suspicious than ever. Someone had information that only advanced scanning equipment could provide. A few weeks later, the situation became even more complicated. Long range. Sensors detected ships in the outer system. The ships did not respond to standard communication attempts. Their design was unlike anything in human databases. So-young was working in the communication center when the first alien transmission was detected. The signals were complex and seemed to be some kind of search pattern. She managed to record several minutes of the transmission before the ships moved beyond sensor range. That evening, she brought the recordings to Taemin's quarters. When she played the alien sounds, Beol's reaction was immediate and dramatic. His scales flashed bright red with alarm. He made distressed clicking sounds and moved nervously around the room. He recognizes these sounds, Taemin observed. This must be his people's language. So Young had been studying the transmissions. The ships are conducting a systematic search of this system. They seem to be looking for something specific. Baiol's scales continued to pulse with anxious colors. He approached Taemin and gently touched his arm with one claw. Images flashed in Taemin's mind. He saw massive dragons flying between the stars. He saw a great battle with bright weapons. He saw himself as a tiny hatchling being abandoned on a hostile world. "They are looking for you," Taemin said softly, "but not to rescue you." The next day brought more bad news. Administrator Kim received official orders from the Colonial Authority. Reports of unusual activity had reached headquarters. A team of military scientists was coming to investigate possible alien contact. They would arrive within 2 weeks. That afternoon, Commander Wu Jin confronted Taemin directly. "I know you are hiding something," he said. "Strange signals, mysterious rescue information, unusual power usage. When the military team arrives, they will find whatever you are hiding." Taemin tried to remain calm. "I'm just doing my research work." "Your research does not explain the massive electromagnetic readings we detected near your quarters last night," Wu Jin replied, "or the fact that our sensors picked up a large life form moving through the underground caves." That evening, Taemin made a difficult decision. Staying at the colony was no longer safe for Baiol. The approaching military team would discover the young dragon. The alien ships in the system suggested that Baiol's people were also searching for him. Neither option seemed good. Taemin began making secret preparations to leave the colony. So Young helped him gather supplies and plan an escape route. They would use the natural cave systems to reach an abandoned mining station in the mountains. From there, they could signal for help from sympathetic contacts. On their last night at the colony, Baiol seemed to understand that everything was changing. His scales glowed with soft, sad colors. He curled up next to Taemin and made gentle purring sounds. "Do not worry, little star," Taemin whispered. "We will find a safe place for you to grow." But deep in his heart, Taemin knew their troubles were just beginning. The galaxy was a dangerous place for a young dragon and his human guardian. Tomorrow, their real adventure would start. As Baiol fell asleep, his scales gradually dimmed to a peaceful silver glow that filled the room with gentle light. It was the last quiet moment they would have for a very long time. 1 year had passed since Taemin first discovered Baiol in the waste area. The young Velthari had grown to the size of a horse. His wings could now carry him short distances through the underground caves. The crystal scales covering his body had become more complex, showing intricate patterns that shifted like living art. When Baiol was happy, golden spirals danced across his hide. When he was thinking hard, silver lines formed geometric shapes along his neck and head. Taemin and So Young had successfully hidden Baiol in the mountain caves for several months. The abandoned mining station provided shelter and basic supplies, but their peaceful refuge was about to be shattered by discoveries that would change everything they thought they knew. Young Mi Shin worked as the colony's communications officer. She was a quiet woman who spent her days monitoring radio signals and data transmissions. Young Mi had always been curious about the strange alien signals detected months earlier. In her spare time, she had been trying to decode the mysterious transmissions. Late one evening, young Mi made a breakthrough that terrified her. She had cracked part of the alien language code. The messages were not random searches as everyone believed. They were specific hunting orders. The alien ships were looking for a particular individual described as the broken hatchling and the mind-touched abomination. Young Mai realized that someone at the colony was in terrible danger. She copied all her translation work onto a secure data chip and left the colony that night. Using a maintenance vehicle, she drove through the desert to find Taemin at the mountain station. When young Mi arrived at the hidden base, Biol greeted her with curious blue-green scales. The young dragon had learned to be cautious around strangers. But something about young Mi's worried expression made him approach her gently. "I have translated the alien messages," young Mi said breathlessly. "They are hunting for someone they call defective and dangerous." She played her translated recordings for Tae-min and So Young. The alien voices spoke of a hatchling born with unusual mental abilities. This hatchling had been cast out by the Velthari Emperor himself because its mind worked differently from normal dragons. The Emperor considered such differences to be shameful weaknesses. Biol listened to the translations with growing agitation. His scales flashed through rapid color changes, showing confusion, fear, and anger. When the recordings mentioned the Emperor, Biol's scales turned deep crimson and stayed that way. "You are not just any Velthari," Tae-min said softly to his companion. "You are the Emperor's own child." As if responding to this revelation, Biol's scales suddenly blazed with brilliant white light. The cave filled with radiance so bright that everyone had to shield their eyes. When the light faded, something had changed. Biol's eyes now held a deeper intelligence. He looked directly at Tae-min and spoke his first human word. "Father," Biol said in a voice like distant thunder. Tae-min's heart nearly stopped. In that moment, he understood that Biol had chosen him as family, not because of biology, but because of love and care. The young dragon had rejected his birth father who abandoned him and accepted the human who had saved him. Their emotional reunion was interrupted by the sound of approaching vehicles. Through the cave entrance, they could see lights moving across the desert. The Imperial Velthari forces had found them. Jae-hyuk Nam was a shuttle pilot who transported supplies between the various mining operations. He had been secretly helping Tae-min by bringing food and equipment to the mountain station. Jae-hyuk had also been monitoring military communications. He burst into the cave with urgent news. "Imperial ships have landed at the main colony," he said. "They are demanding the return of what they call stolen property. The colonial authority has agreed to help them search." Outside, the approaching vehicles stopped just beyond the cave entrance. Powerful searchlights swept across the rocky ground. Alien voices called out in the Velthari language. Young Mi translated their words. "They are offering rewards for information about the abomination. They promise to spare any humans who cooperate." Biol's scales turned dark with anger. He had grown large enough to be truly dangerous now. His claws could tear through metal. His wings could create powerful wind gusts. But Tae-min knew that fighting was not the answer. "We need to leave this planet," Tae-min said. "Biol will never be safe here." Jae-hyuk nodded. "My cargo shuttle has enough fuel to reach the next system, but we would have to leave immediately." The Imperial forces were moving closer to the cave. Their searchlights probed every shadow and crevice. Soon they would discover the entrance to the underground chambers. Biol surprised everyone by walking calmly to the cave wall and placing his claws against the stone. His scales began glowing with soft blue light that spread through the rock itself. The entire mountain began to hum with harmonic vibrations. "What is he doing?" So Young whispered. Young Mi listened to the alien voices outside. Their tone had changed from confident to confused. "They are saying their instruments have stopped working. Something is interfering with their sensors." Biol was using his mental abilities to disrupt the electronic equipment of the search teams. The Imperial soldiers found themselves lost in a maze of false readings and phantom signals. Their vehicles began malfunctioning, their communication systems filled with static. Using this confusion as cover, the small group of humans and one young dragon made their escape. They moved through hidden passages that led to a concealed landing pad where Jae-hyuk's shuttle waited. Loading Biol into the cargo hold was challenging because of his size. The dragon had to fold his wings tightly and squeeze through the loading doors. Once inside, His scales dimmed to a soft silver glow that provided gentle light in the cramped space. As the shuttle lifted off into the night sky, Taemin looked back at the planet that had been their home. Searchlights still swept across the mountains below. The Imperial forces would continue hunting, but they would find only empty caves. During the flight to the next system, Biol demonstrated more of his unusual abilities. He could sense the emotions and thoughts of everyone on the shuttle. When Jae-hyuk felt nervous about flying through an asteroid field, Biol's scales pulsed with calming blue waves that helped the pilot relax. More remarkably, Biol began absorbing memories from his human companions. When Taemin touched the dragon's scales, Biol experienced flashes of human knowledge and emotion. He learned about Earth's history, human culture, and scientific discoveries all in a few moments. He is not just intelligent, So Young observed. He is designed to learn and adapt in ways we cannot imagine. Youngmi had been studying more of the translated Imperial communications. The messages mention others like Biol, other young Velthari who were cast out for being different. If we could find them, we could build a family of outcasts, Taemin finished. Dragons who choose love over power. As their shuttle traveled through hyperspace toward an uncertain future, Biol's scales glowed with hopeful golden patterns. For the first time since leaving his birth world, the young dragon felt truly free. He had found his real family among the humans who valued his differences instead of fearing them. The galaxy was vast and dangerous, but Biol was no longer facing it alone. He had Taemin, his chosen father. He had friends who would protect him. Most importantly, he had learned that true strength came not from the power to destroy, but from the courage to care for others. Their adventure among the stars was just beginning. 2 years had passed since their escape from the mining colony. Biol had grown to the size of a small building. His wingspan could now cover a basketball court when fully extended. The crystal formations on his scales had become incredibly complex, showing patterns that seemed to tell stories of their adventures together. The hidden research station in the outer rim had become their new home. The station orbited a dead star, making it nearly impossible to detect. Professor Dongho Kang had built this place decades ago as a refuge for researchers who studied dangerous or forbidden subjects. Professor Kang was an elderly man with kind eyes and a brilliant mind. He had spent most of his life studying galactic history and military strategy. When Taemin contacted him through secret channels, the old professor had immediately offered sanctuary. "Knowledge should be free, Professor," Kang had said, "and any creature capable of learning deserves the chance to grow." The research station was perfect for Biol's continued development. Large chambers gave him room to practice flying. Advanced computer systems allowed him to access vast databases of information. Most importantly, the station was staffed with humans who saw Biol as a person rather than a weapon. Captain Mik-young-oh was a former military officer who had left the service to pursue research. She was a tough woman with a good heart who quickly became one of Biol's favorite teachers. Mik-young taught the young dragon about strategy, tactics, and leadership through war games and simulations. Biol's scales would flash with excited silver patterns during these lessons. He absorbed military knowledge with frightening speed. But Mik-young always emphasized that the best victories were won without fighting. True strength, she would tell Biol, is knowing when not to use your power. Hyun-soo Yu was the station's technology specialist. He was a cheerful young man who loved solving complex problems. Hyun-soo had developed special interfaces that allowed Biol to communicate directly with computer systems. The dragon's bioelectric abilities let him process information in ways that amazed even the brilliant engineer. "He does not just use computers," Hyun-soo explained to Taemin. "He thinks with them. His mind and the machines become one system." The most important part of Biol's education came from his memory-sharing sessions with Taemin. Several times each week, the dragon would place his claws gently on Taemin's head and experience human memories directly. Through these sessions, Biol learned about human history, philosophy, art, and culture. Biol was particularly fascinated by stories of human cooperation and democracy. He spent hours studying how different human societies had learned to work together despite their differences. The concept of choosing leaders through voting rather than violence was completely foreign to Velthari culture. "Your people elect their rulers?" Biol asked one day, his scales flickering with curious gold patterns. "The best human societies do," Taman replied. "We believe that power should serve the people, not rule over them." These ideas created deep changes in how Biol thought about leadership and society. His scales would glow with thoughtful blue waves as he considered how these human concepts might apply to his own people. During their exploration of the station's vast databases, Taman and Biol made a discovery that shocked them both. Hidden in ancient archaeological records were references to early Velthari civilization. Thousands of years ago, the Velthari had not been ruled by emperors. They had lived in cooperative communities where decisions were made by councils of elders. "My people were not always conquerors," Biol said, his scales pulsing with amazed rainbow colors. "We once knew peace." Professor Kang helped them study the ancient records more carefully. The evidence showed that the Velthari Empire was relatively recent in galactic terms. Something had changed their society from peaceful to aggressive about 2,000 years ago. "Perhaps," the old professor suggested, "your people simply forgot how to live differently. Maybe they need someone to remind them of their better nature." As Biol's knowledge and abilities grew, disturbing reports began reaching the station. The Velthari Empire was expanding more aggressively than ever before. Entire systems were being conquered or destroyed. Refugee ships brought stories of terrible battles and burning worlds. But there were also whispers of something else. Young Velthari were beginning to question their emperor's methods. Some had been caught helping non-Velthari escape from conquered worlds. These rebels were being hunted down and executed as traitors. "There are others like me," Biol said after hearing these reports. His scales glowed with hopeful green patterns. "Others who see that the Empire's path is wrong." Captain Mi Kyung began training Biol in advanced communication techniques. If there were other rebellious young Velthari scattered across the galaxy, they would need a way to coordinate their efforts. Biol's unique neural structure made him capable of long-range telepathic communication. With practice, he learned to send thoughts and emotions across incredible distances. His first successful contact came with a young Velthari female named Ara, who was hiding in a system 300 light-years away. The connection was brief but powerful. Through Ara, Biol sensed dozens of other young Velthari who had rejected the Empire's brutal ways. They were scattered, hiding, afraid, but united in their desire for change. "They are waiting for someone to lead them," Biol told his human family. "Someone to show them a different path." Hyun-Soo developed technology that could amplify Biol's telepathic abilities. Using a combination of advanced computers and bio-neural interfaces, they created a communication network that could reach across the entire galaxy. Biol could now stay in constant contact with other rebel Velthari. The network grew quickly as word spread through secret channels. Within months, hundreds of young Velthari had joined what they began calling the New Flight. These rebels shared information about Imperial movements, helped refugees escape, and slowly began to coordinate resistance efforts. But their activities did not go unnoticed. The Velthari Emperor had become aware that something was undermining his authority. He issued orders for the immediate execution of any Velthari who showed signs of mental contamination by alien ideas. The first major Imperial retaliation came without warning. A fleet of warships attacked a human colony where several rebel Velthari had been hiding. The entire system was destroyed as an example to others. When news of the massacre reached the research station, Biol's scales turned deep black with grief and rage. He had never felt such powerful emotions before. The station's walls vibrated with the force of his anguish. Taemin held his adopted son as the young dragon mourned for the innocent lives lost. "We cannot let their deaths be meaningless," Taemin said softly. "We must make sure this never happens again." That night, Baeol made a decision that would change the course of galactic history. He reached out through his telepathic network to every rebel Velthari he could contact. His message was simple but revolutionary. "We will no longer hide," he told them. "We will no longer run. The time has come to show the galaxy that there is another way to be Velthari. We choose love over hate. We choose cooperation over conquest. We choose freedom over tyranny." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Rebel Velthari across, the galaxy began revealing themselves and gathering their followers. The new flight was no longer a hidden resistance movement. It had become an open revolution. Professor Kang watched these developments with mixture of pride and worry. "You have started something that cannot be stopped," he told Baeol. "But revolution always comes with a terrible price." As reports poured in of battles between Imperial forces and rebel Velthari, Taemin realized that their quiet life of learning and growth was over. Baeol was no longer just his adopted son. He had become the leader of a galactic independence movement. The young dragon's scales now glowed with steady, determined patterns of gold and silver. He had found his purpose and accepted the responsibilities that came with it. The scared hatchling that Taemin had found in a waste area had grown into a leader who could reshape the galaxy. Their real test was about to begin. 5 years had passed since Taemin first discovered the abandoned hatchling. Baeol had grown into a magnificent dragon whose crystal scales could be seen glowing from orbit when he was excited. His wingspan now measured over 200 meters. When he flew, his scales created light patterns that looked like aurora dancing across his massive form. The hidden research station had expanded into a secret city. Thousands of beings from dozens of species had joined the rebellion against the Velthari Empire. They called themselves the Free Alliance, and they looked to Baeol as their inspiration and leader. Insu Ro was a brilliant diplomat who had left his position with the colonial authority to join the rebellion. He was a patient man who understood how to build bridges between different species and cultures. Insu had been working tirelessly to create formal alliances with governments that opposed the empire. "We are no longer just a resistance movement," Insu reported during a council meeting. 17 major systems have officially recognized the Free Alliance as a legitimate government. They are providing ships, supplies, and safe passage for refugees. Seokjin Bey was a former military commander who had brought several entire fleets to join the rebellion. He was a strategic genius who helped coordinate the growing war effort. Seokjin treated Baeol with the respect due to a head of state, but he also maintained the warmth of an old friend. "Our forces are growing stronger every day," Seokjin reported. "But the Emperor's response has been swift and brutal. He is executing any Velthari suspected of sympathy with our cause." The rebellion had grown beyond what anyone had imagined possible. Baeol's telepathic network now connected thousands of rebel Velthari across the galaxy. These dragons had learned to work together in ways that their species had never attempted before. They shared information instantly across vast distances. They coordinated attacks and rescue missions with perfect timing. But the most remarkable development was Baeol's ability to create temporary mental connections between different species. Using advanced biotechnology that Taemin had developed, humans and Velthari could share consciousness for brief periods. This allowed for unprecedented cooperation and understanding. The first successful test of this technology had been during a rescue mission to save prisoners from an Imperial labor camp. Human pilots had shared their flying skills directly with Velthari warriors, while the dragons had shared their strength and firepower with human commandos. The mission had been completed without a single casualty. This changes everything, Captain Mi-kyung had said after reviewing the mission reports. When different species can truly understand each other, they become unstoppable. But the Empire was not standing idle. The Velthari Emperor had declared total war against what he called the contamination of pure dragon blood by inferior species. Imperial fleets began systematic attacks on any world that harbored refugees or provided aid to the rebellion. The war reached a terrible climax when Imperial forces attacked the human core worlds. Earth itself came under siege as massive Velthari battleships darkened the skies over major cities. Billions of lives hung in the balance as human defense fleets struggled against overwhelming odds. Biol felt every human death through his connection to Taemin. His scales blazed with anguished white fire as he experienced the suffering of the species that had saved and raised him. For the first time since the rebellion began, the young dragon leader felt the weight of true despair. "I started this war," Biol said to Taemin as they watched reports of the Earth bombardment. "These people are dying because of my choices." Taemin placed his hand on his adopted son's great head. Even after all these years, that simple touch could calm Biol's most troubled emotions. "You did not start this war," Taemin said firmly. "Tyrants start wars by choosing oppression over justice. You are fighting to end a war that began long before you were born." The turning point came when Biol made a desperate decision. He would use his growing psychic abilities to coordinate the largest military operation in galactic history. Every rebel Velthari, every allied ship, every resistance fighter would act as one unified force. The risks were enormous. Connecting so many minds across such vast distances could damage or destroy Biol's consciousness permanently. But as reports continued to arrive of civilian casualties on Earth, the young dragon knew he had no choice. Biol positioned himself at the center of the most advanced communication array ever built. Crystalline conduits channeled his bioelectric energy through quantum transmitters that could reach every corner of the galaxy. As the connection established, Biol's scales began glowing with intensity that forced everyone to evacuate the chamber. Through the network, Biol became the central nervous system for millions of beings. He coordinated simultaneous attacks on Imperial strongholds in over 1,000 systems. Rebel fleets struck with perfect timing, while Velthari defectors sabotaged Imperial ships from within. Most remarkably, Biol managed to reach through the network to touch the minds of Imperial Velthari soldiers. For brief moments, these warriors experienced human emotions and memories through Biol's connection to his human family. They felt love, compassion, and the desire to protect rather than destroy. The effect was immediate and dramatic, entire. Imperial fleets began switching sides as their crews realized they had been fighting for a cause built on fear and hatred. The tide of battle turned across the galaxy as the Empire's own forces joined the rebellion, but the effort nearly killed Biol. When the massive psychic link finally collapsed, the great dragon lay unconscious for 3 days. His scales had turned completely white, and his breathing was barely detectable. Taemin never left his side during those terrible hours of uncertainty. When Biol finally awakened, his first words were about the casualties from the operation. "How many did we lose?" he asked weakly. "Fewer than we saved," Taemin replied. "The Imperial attack on Earth has been repelled. Refugee ships are heading to safety throughout the galaxy, and over half the Imperial fleet has joined our cause. But their victory came with devastating personal cost. During the massive psychic operation, Imperial forces had managed to track the signal back to its source. A strike team had captured several key leaders of the rebellion, including Professor Kang and young Mi Shin. The prisoners were being held on the Imperial capital world, where the Emperor planned to execute them publicly as an example to other rebels. Among the captives was Taemin himself. He had been taken during the chaos following Biol's collapse. When Biol learned of Taemin's capture, His scales flashed through every color in rapid succession before settling on deep crimson rage. The dragon who had always chosen peaceful solutions over violence now faced a choice that would define both his character and the future of the galaxy. "I will not let them hurt my father," Beol declared. His voice carried harmonics that made the station's hull vibrate. "The Emperor wants war? Then he will learn why dragons were once the most feared beings in the galaxy." Captain Mi Kyung and Commander Seok Jin began planning rescue operations, but Beol was already reaching out through his restored telepathic network. Every rebel Velthari, every allied fleet, every sympathetic being in the galaxy felt his call. The final battle for freedom was about to begin, and this time Beol would not be fighting just for ideals or political change. He would be fighting to save the human who had given him love when he had nothing, who had chosen to see potential instead of danger, who had become the father that his own species had rejected. The Emperor had made a critical error. He had threatened the one being in the galaxy that Beol valued above his own life. Now he would face the full fury of a dragon who had learned that sometimes love requires the courage to fight. The storm was gathering, and its center was a crystal dragon whose scales now burned with the fire of righteous determination. 10 years had passed since Tae-min first found a starving hatchling behind waste containers on a remote mining world. Now he stood in the great council chamber of the Velthari capital world, watching his adopted son address representatives from across the galaxy. Beol had grown beyond anything anyone could have imagined. His body stretched nearly 300 meters from nose to tail. His crystal scales had evolved into complex geometric patterns that told the story of every world he had helped liberate. When he spoke, his voice carried harmonics that could be understood by any intelligent species. The rescue mission to save Tae-min and the other prisoners had become the final battle of the war. Beol had led the largest fleet in galactic history in an assault on the imperial capital. But the most important fighting had not happened in space. It had taken place in the minds and hearts of the Velthari people themselves. Using his expanded telepathic abilities, Beol had connected with every Velthari on the capital world simultaneously. For the first time in their history, ordinary dragons experienced what their emperor truly thought of them. They felt his contempt for their lives, his willingness to sacrifice them for his own glory, his complete lack of love for his own people. At the same time, Beol shared his own memories with them. They experienced the love of a human father who had saved an abandoned hatchling. They felt the warmth of friendship across species barriers. They saw what their civilization could become if it chose cooperation over conquest. The revolution had been swift and decisive. Imperial guards had thrown down their weapons rather than fight their own awakened people. The emperor himself had been captured alive, though Beol had chosen mercy over revenge. Now the hard work of building a new society had begun. The Velthari Republic was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Instead of a single ruler commanding absolute obedience, representatives from every world participated in making decisions. Dragons who had once competed for dominance now worked together to solve problems. Empress Da-in Seo was the human leader who had helped establish the new galactic government. She was a wise woman who understood that lasting peace required justice for all species, not just victory for one side. Under her guidance, the Free Alliance had evolved into the Galactic Democratic Union. "Today we celebrate not the defeat of an empire," Empress Seo said during the ceremony, "but the birth of true civilization. When different species choose to help each other instead of fight each other, anything becomes possible." Beol had been elected as the first president of the Velthari Republic. The title was chosen specifically to show that he served his people rather than ruling over them. His scales glowed with humble gold patterns as he accepted the responsibility. "I am not your emperor," Biol had told the gathered Velthari during his acceptance speech. "I am your servant. My job is to help you build the society you want to live in." The transformation of Velthari culture had been remarkable to witness. Dragons who had lived their entire lives in fear of punishment for showing weakness now freely expressed emotions and formed friendships. Art, music, and literature flourished as creative expression was no longer forbidden. Elder Kyung-soo Lim was the historian who had been chosen to document this incredible transformation. He was an old man with sharp eyes who understood the importance of recording truth for future generations. This is the most significant change in galactic civilization since the development of faster-than-light travel, Elder Lim wrote in his chronicles. A species known for conquest has chosen to become builders of peace. The implications will be felt for thousands of years. The changes went far beyond politics and government. Biol's biotechnology innovations had created new possibilities for cooperation between species. The consciousness-sharing devices allowed beings to truly understand each other's perspectives. Fear and prejudice became much harder to maintain when you could literally experience life through another being's senses. Schools throughout the galaxy began teaching integrated curriculums where human children learned alongside young Velthari, Zephyrian students, and dozens of other species. The barriers that had separated civilizations for millennia began to dissolve as young beings grew up seeing diversity as normal and beneficial. Taemin had been appointed as the first universal ambassador responsible for developing protocols for peaceful contact with newly discovered species. His experience raising Biol had taught him how to build trust across seemingly impossible differences. "Every species has something valuable to contribute," Taemin explained to a group of diplomatic trainees. "Our job is not to judge or control, but to listen and learn." The economic benefits of peace had been immediate and dramatic. Resources that had been wasted on weapons were redirected to exploration, research, and improving quality of life. Trade between formerly hostile species created prosperity that benefited everyone. Medical advances accelerated as different species shared their knowledge. Diseases that had plagued civilizations for centuries were cured through collaborative research. The average lifespan for most species increased significantly as healthcare improved. Perhaps most importantly, the galaxy had begun to feel safe for small and peaceful species. Worlds that had lived in fear of conquest could now focus on art, science, and philosophy. The diversity of cultures and ideas created an explosion of innovation and creativity, but the greatest change was in Biol himself. The frightened, abandoned hatchling had grown into a being of wisdom and compassion. His scales now displayed complex patterns that seemed to contain infinite depth and beauty. When he was deeply happy, the patterns created visual symphonies that could bring viewers to tears. On quiet evenings, Biol still enjoyed simple moments with his human family. Taemin would sit beside the great dragon's head and share stories of their early adventures. So Young, now director of the Interspecies Research Institute, would bring reports of new discoveries. The close friends who had risked everything to save one small creature remained the center of Biol's emotional world. "Do you ever regret leaving your old life?" Biol asked Taemin during one of these peaceful moments. Taemin smiled and placed his hand on his adopted son's great snout. "How could I regret the choice that brought me the greatest joy of my life? You are my son, and I am proud of everything you have become." Young humans and Velthari now grew up together in integrated communities throughout the galaxy. They played the same games, learned the same lessons, and formed friendships that transcended species boundaries. What had once seemed impossible had become routine. The transformation was perhaps best symbolized by the new schools where human teachers worked alongside Velthari instructors. Children who might have been enemies in the old empire now collaborated on projects and celebrated each other's successes. As Taman watched a group of mixed-species children playing together in the capital city's Central Park, he marveled at how much had changed. The simple act of feeding a hungry creature had grown into a galaxy-spanning transformation that would benefit trillions of beings for generations to come. Buell approached quietly, his massive form moving with surprising grace. His scales pulsed, with contented blue-green patterns as he watched the children play. They will grow up in a galaxy where differences are celebrated instead of feared, Buell observed. They will never know the loneliness of being abandoned for being different. That may be your greatest gift to the galaxy, Taman replied. Not the end of the Empire, but the beginning of acceptance. As the twin suns set over the capital city, Buell's scales began their evening transformation. Gentle golden light spread across his body, creating patterns that told the story of a small act of kindness that had changed the course of history. The hungry hatchling had grown into a leader whose empire was built not on fear and conquest, but on love and cooperation. And at the center of it all remained the simple truth that had started everything. Sometimes the most powerful force in the galaxy is one being choosing to help another, regardless of the differences between them. The galaxy was still vast and full of mysteries to explore, but now it was also filled with hope, friendship, and the knowledge that even the smallest acts of compassion could reshape the cosmos itself.